Since 1966, the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences has awarded the Emmy for Outstanding Drama Series to more than 30 TV shows. Some have won the honor once, some up to 4 times, the most any series has ever won. While the bar has been significantly raised on what constitutes top-tier television, all of the shows to receive the Best Drama Series honor deserve consideration. And so, the Great Pop Culture Debate wants to determine, what is the best TV series to win the Emmy for Best Drama? Tell Dr. Doug Ross that I'm waiting in the ER, because I'll be his baby tonight. I'm your host, Eric Resniak. Please help me welcome my panel, who are in no way endorsed by this or any academy. In a world full of Peggies and Bettys, she remains a Joan. It's the panel's favorite redheaded goddess, Kate Rakulia.
Eric, go home, take a paper bag, and cut some eye holes out of it. Put it over your head, get undressed, and look at yourself in the mirror. Really evaluate where your strengths and weaknesses are. Be honest.
That's how I spend most of my Saturday nights. Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome. And scene.
And scene. He needs to book a follow-up appointment with Dr. Melfi to discuss his recurring dream about ducks. It's Kevin Dillon.
Hey, bada bing, gabagool.
Yay.
I'm offended as an Italian.
I'm sorry. You're Italian.
No,
I'm Italian too. I had chicken parm for dinner.
I had chicken parm for dinner. I'm an honorary Italian.
Yeah.
And lastly, our extra special guest panelist drinks from the keg of glory. Please welcome to the podcast, Steve Nikoloff.
I bring the finest muffins and bagels in all the land.
And honestly, a muffin sounds amazing right now, so I'm going to take you up on that. So for those listening, this is a special Patreon-sponsored episode. Our top-tier Patreons get to pick a mini-sode topic for us to cover each year, and also get to select the panel. Steve, why did you select Best Drama Series winner as your topic?
Well, first and foremost, I'm an award show junkie. I can't get enough of award shows for the most part, and I can't explain why. I don't know if it's latent narcissism or my love of gold statues or something along those lines. But I particularly like the Emmys. I watch a lot of TV, I'm not going to lie. And so this really spoke to me, especially after you guys have done a couple other best picture, best comedy series. I thought drama needed to get its due.
It's a great point. And you are in very good company with the people on this this episode, who watch a lot of television and are also weirdly award show obsessed. I mean, Kevin is the most award show obsessed person I've ever met in my life.
It's true. I have been on Gold Derby probably since 1998 and predicting award shows and doing all that good stuff. And I get very competitive and I win all the time.
Which is going to make a really fun episode. And I'll remind Kevin that our Patreon is our special guest, so he has to be nice.
I'm going to be on my best behavior tonight. I'll try.
Thank you, sweetie.
Oh, I really hope you don't.
Don't ask for things that you don't want to put up with.
If you ask, I will deliver.
So, FYI, there are actually 2 more of the top tier Patreon slots that are now open. So if you're interested in sponsoring a debate, head over to Patreon and become one of our best supporters ever now. So how does this work? Since this is a mini-sode, there was no public poll. Our panelists went through the 30 plus winners for Outstanding Drama Series in the history of the Emmys. We individually ranked our top 15s, and from that we created seedings based on those scores, with the top 16 overall making the bracket. Now we argue about it and insult each other, all for your amusement. Want to play along at home? You can go to greatpopculturedebate.com and find the polls and brackets tab. There you'll find the listener bracket for this and every episode. Make a copy for yourself. That is super important. I keep getting these Gmail alerts. Somebody wants to share this document. No, make a copy. Fill it out and see if your picks match up with ours. I will also start by saying that there were a few shows that I was genuinely surprised did not make the bracket for us that had won the Emmy for Best Drama Series. Succession. I think I was the only person to put Succession on my picks, and I was curious from the panel, did you not consider it a drama? I thought that may be the issue. Anyone want to chime in there?
I watched one episode and I was like, the times are too dark. All these people hate each other. Normally this is my jam, rich people being terrible, but I haven't watched it. So that's why.
I'll be honest, me too. I don't know. I watched an episode or two and I didn't get into it. And then everyone told me how good it was. And there's so much on TV right now. I've never made it back to watch it. But I will say I do hope at some point to go and watch it now that season 3 is coming out.
Yeah, and I know Kevin watches it because he and I watched it together.
I love it.
Yeah, I was curious. I don't think it made your bracket either, Kevin.
It didn't. You know what it is? It's like it's that, you know me, I'm very anti-recency bias, and so I think I intentionally didn't put it on because it's like it is 2 seasons in. I do think it's fantastic. I'm not sure that we're at a legacy point yet with the show. This 3rd season is coming out soon, and I think we'll get there. I know based on the posters that we will get there. Good Lord. The poster of Jerry and Kieran Culkin's character, like, looking at each other in this, like, Harold and Maude kind of way. I was like, oh, I'm in.
Honestly, that poster made me want to go back and watch it more than the episodes that I watched.
I will also say this. If you watched an episode or 2 from season 1, the tone of season 1 is very different from the tone of season 2. Season 1, they kind of lean a little bit more into broad comedy, especially with the Tom Gregg stuff. That's still there in season 2, but it's much darker and much sharper. I mean, Kevin, am I wrong? Do you feel like there's a tonal shift?
Yeah, I think they're leaning into the farce of it all a little bit, but in a darker way. I still am waiting for those 2 to have sex. I mean, it has to happen. I really need it. I need Cousin Greg
before the end of the show.
It has to. But no, I think you're right. I think it really veers into like the Kendall of it all and the darkness of that character. And I'm not going to spoil any part of season 1 because the way season 1 ends builds into the darkness. I'll just say that. And like, it is a really, you have to go in it knowing that they're terrible. It's like watching Vanderpump Rules. If you were ever a Vanderpump Rules person, they're all just awful human beings. And you just have to get on board with that or jump off the train.
And normally I dig that, but I could kind of tell too. I was like, if I just stick with this, it's going to pay off and I'm going to love it. Right. But I just hadn't.
I think it's hard to evaluate a show that's still airing too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's none of the shows on our bracket are still on the air. And there's also a couple shows on here that if it was still airing, I would have probably advanced it. But now knowing how it ends, I'm like, ugh, so I think it's hard to evaluate. Even The Crown. I mean, granted, I loved season 4. I mean, I think everyone did, but we're getting a whole new cast. So it's hard to say, what's going to happen as we move forward. Yeah.
And I do want to address that particular, not elephant. What is it? Clydesdale? What are the, I don't know. Corgi. The corgi.
It's a corgi in the room.
Yes.
I wish there were a corgi in this room.
Right? You will not find the Crown on this bracket. We started working on this episode before the Emmys took place in 2021, so we did not know they had won that honor at that point. So just put it out of your mind. Ignore it, just like the royal family does with Prince Edward. So moving on, I was also surprised that nobody else voted for Handmaid's Tale. I was curious if anybody had any thoughts on that. I did not rank it very high. I could only get through the first season and maybe a quarter of Handmaid's Tale because
Same. I watched the first season and I was just like, I love that book. I love that book. And I actually thought the first season was a really interesting work of adaptation, but watching it when it came out in the moment that it did, I was like, this feels clarifying, but I was like, I can't go there. I can't continue to live in this fictional world. And I think just from what I've picked up from the discourse that like the show has continued, but it has not necessarily advanced or grown as a show.
I will say to that, Kate, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that season 1 with the source material definitely had a trajectory that they were on.
Yeah.
Seasons 2 and 3 really, it got dark and back and forth and floundered. But then I will say season 4, the most recent season, was excellent. And so again, I think it goes to this idea that it's really hard to evaluate a show that's still airing
and running. Yeah,
that's such a great point that both you and Kevin have brought up, and I'm immediately flashing. And we'll get into this later, but like Game of Thrones and Lost, both of them are on this list. Both of them are these brackets, and I think you have to have that conversation. Are we looking at the seasons in particular that won, or are we looking at how it was overall?
Yep, didn't stick the landing, etc. versus Transcendent season.
Exactly. This is one of the things that I have been discussed with listeners who are like, you all need to be more transparent about your rubric about why you're voting for certain things. I was like, thank you. I will
Thanks
take
for the feedback.
No, it's actually very good feedback. And I know I came in and was acting like I was pissy about that, but I wasn't. It's actually like, no, you're right. We need to explain where we're coming from in this. But as we're going through these battles, I think that's something for us to keep in mind. Like, are you thinking strictly about the seasons that won, or are you thinking about the show overall? And generally with me, yes, sir.
You could be just as lazy as the Emmy voters and give no reason to how they pick the people and just rubber stamp things. Isn't that how you do it? You just pick the same show for every award. Thanks, Emmy voters, the last 2 years.
Just say Modern Family, Kevin.
Oof. Oh, I would not know. Don't even get me started on that show.
The other two that I was surprised did not make it onto our brackets were LA Law and Cagney and Lacey, a little bit older. But I also know that my panel wanted to briefly talk about shows that they were surprised actually never won the Emmy for Best Drama Series. Kevin, did you have something that you want to talk about specifically?
Well, we have so the one thing that always is a stain on the Emmys is and I know this is one of those things that always gets said is that The Wire was never nominated for drama series. And that is, it's just, the Emmys hate David Simon. They hate him. Mm-hmm. They don't nominate any of his shows. He also did The Plot Against America, and I understand why that show did not get nominated. It's about what if a white supremacist was elected to the White House. And it was during the Trump. Yeah. And it's like, oh, I get that one. But The Wire was so good. I think The Wire just honestly shows their bias against shows centered around Black folks. But I guess I'm kind of surprised that Downton Abbey never won the drama series.
It's interesting.
I don't think it
very
ever
much
beat
like,
the limit. Oh, sorry, Kate, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems very much like Emmy bait.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It won limited series.
It didn't break out of the limited series. I think people always thought about it like that.
I mean, I wish The Good Wife had won. That is a wish, but that never did, because that is the last great network TV show to be nominated. Sorry, This Is Us.
No, you're
not
right.
Sorry,
you're right, Kevin. You're right.
But The Good Wife, I mean, that one season, I think it was season 5, where everyone was jumping on the I don't want to spoil it for people who've never watched, but the Josh Charles story, the Christine Baranski, it was just such a good season. I think that was the last season of Breaking Bad, though, so it was never going to win, but that would have been the one that I would have been excited for on this list, is The Good Wife.
Kate, what about you?
The Americans. What an accomplishment, that television show. From beginning to end, talk about shows that stick the landing. There are times during my regular day when I'm just walking around and I'll hear a certain U2 song and just be unable to function for 5 or 10 minutes. Incredible
Are we talking
show.
about the album that keeps appearing on my iPhone, even though I've deleted it.
No, not the Ghost U2 album. The correctly deployed. I think it's With or Without You. Yes, that's what it is. It's so great show. And also Deadwood. Deadwood ended in a weird place. I actually still haven't seen the movie, but such an incredible TV show that just never, I don't think it got any, I mean, people were like, you should watch Deadwood, but I think it was a little impenetrable for some people. But those are my two that I wish had gotten a little more love.
Steve, what about you? Any thoughts?
I don't want to piggyback on Kevin, but and I don't want to go against my own rules of not talking about shows that have not stopped airing, but my God, how has The Good Fight been nominated for nothing? I don't understand that. I don't. Christine Baranski is a goddess. I don't understand the fact that her only Emmys are for that Sybil Shepherd show.
No,
I actually love that show, though.
I loved the show and I loved her character Marianne, but my God, if that doesn't limit her abilities as an actress, it's so good. The Good Fight. I mean, the first season was a little uneven. They didn't know what to do with the whole Bernie Madoff storyline, but once they got rid of that and they really leaned into this sort of, for lack of a better term, the Trump years, man, that show really I think it's better than The Good Wife on some levels.
It is. I agree.
Yeah,
I
you'll
actually
never
agree.
find a bigger supporter of the good fight than Kevin. He's
Oh my God, I love
champion.
Kevin, you and I are cut from the same cloth then, because
So good.
I can't get enough of that show.
Awesome. Anything else for you?
No, that's it.
Okay, there was one that just came to my mind, and of course it's already gone. So with that, let's just get on to the debates. For the first time in the history of the Great Pop Culture Debate, we have unanimous panelist picks on 6 out of the 8 round 1 matchups.
Damn!
Never happens. But so even though we will be breezing through by the actual vote without actual voting here, we're still going to give you some arguments, since that's presumably why you're listening to this show. And so we will be touching on some of the ones that we nixed. First up, AMC's Mad Men, a 4-time Best Drama Series winner, didn't need any fancy ad campaign to easily knock out CBS's 2-time winner, Lou Grant. And I think, Kevin, you wanted to mention a little bit about Lou Grant before we moved on.
Yeah, just briefly. I think that it was really great to see James L. Brooks transition into... It's not even really, it's not a dramedy, a drama that really highlights some of the depth and breadth of his work. I've not seen all of Lou Grant, but I've seen episodes of it. I feel like I watched it at my grandparents' house in like reruns. But like that was their kind of gig. They liked shows about like journalism and like exposing the truth. And that was kind of what, not even kind of, that was what that show did. It took the like silliness and loveliness of Mary Tyler Moore and turned this kind of... Lou Grant in Mary Tyler Moore is very dour. He's very like curmudgeonly and cranky.
Hate spunk.
Yeah, I hate spunk. And in this, he's like very nurturing but firm, and there's like a tenderness to him that I think you actually kind of see evolve in the Mary Tyler Moore show, but this show really, towards the end, this show really employs this, which I think is a brilliant shift, because you rarely see the comedy spinoff turned into a drama. Like that doesn't happen.
Right.
And Ed Asner, I think, was the first person to win for playing the same character in both comedies and drama.
Oh, that's cool. That's good trivia.
Yeah, and that's like impressive. And he's just an impressive feat, and he carries this show on his back in large way. But I remember like really liking the supporting cast. That's where I think I first saw Nancy Marchand, although it might have been the remake of Sabrina, and I was obsessed with her in that movie. She played their mother, and she was so good. Oh, I loved her in that. And the other thing that's also fascinating about this is the way it was canceled. Allegedly, it was canceled because of Ed Asner's politics, him being vocally opposed to U.S. government policies in Central America, which I think is fascinating. And I mean, it was a CBS show, so of course it probably was canceled for that. But they alleged low ratings, which the ratings for this show, this I feel like was kind of as prestige as you got in the beginning. This was, I would say, the first maybe genuinely US based prestige Emmy winner, probably.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, I looked at the list going back to 1950, and it wasn't called Outstanding Emmy until 1966, and it was a lot of like Playhouse 90 and like some really like, you're like, really? Like her? That was the stuff that was winning the Emmys.
You have a great personality.
Exactly. And very low center of gravity. But Lou Grant was, I think, the first one that could be considered prestige. So I'm glad that we gave him its moment in the sun. And also, on this podcast, we stan Ed Asner. He is an American treasure.
R.I.P.
Yes.
R.I.P.
Wow.
legend.
So sad.
Although a great life and an amazing career.
Yes.
Yeah.
So next up, NBC's The West Wing, a 4-time Best Drama Series winner, won the popular vote over ABC's 30-something, a 1-time Best Drama winner, causing that show to go into a total meltdown by questioning all of its life decisions. So before we move forward, I will speak a little bit on behalf of 30-something. 30-something came out right when I was starting to become actually involved in popular culture in a real way. I remember it winning, and it was kind of a surprise win because it was not a rating success. It was that kind of the little show that could. I do think it was very much a show of its time and kind of gave us or normalized the neurotic boomer adult, right? I think it became that show about just ordinary people living ordinary lives and struggling and trying to figure out what the fuck they were doing as they cruised down that highway to a midlife crisis. And now that's everywhere, right? I mean, the countless shows have kind of taken that setup.
How many midlife crises ended up in Little Timmy's snow globe, though?
That's a great point. That's a great point. Is that what won that year?
No. That's the final episode of 30 something. I don't think it was their final episode,
Wasn't that
right?
that was Saint Elsewhere.
Saint Elsewhere.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
Which also never won the best Emmy for best drama, which surprised me because I assumed Saint Elsewhere had.
I feel like I should walk away from this podcast right now. I'm
you're
so
fine.
sorry.
I will say also, as to 30 something, it was also the first time we saw characters really graduate from supporting roles to lead roles, as they kind of figured out who was good. I don't mean that, but like Patricia Wedding, for instance, was the first person to really, she won supporting actress for that role, and then she won lead actress not too long after that, kind of like some other people who I might talk about later in this podcast. But, it was a show that was willing to adapt to the storyline as opposed to trying to force a storyline down the road.
That's a great way of looking at it. Yeah, it definitely seemed like a more low-key type of show than many of the ones that are on here, which I think have a very strong narrative drive. And maybe that's just because, again, I was only quasi-aware of it and was not as, I was probably a early teen when that was on, as opposed to a 30-something, which would be the target demographic. But I didn't feel like it was as intense of a show.
Is it the first, I hate to use this term because it's pejoratively used. Is it the first kind of soapy adjacent winner? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It honestly might be the only one.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe Picket Fences, but I mean, that's not really soapy. I can't, but it's not like Brothers and Sisters or something like that ever won, or the soapy ones tended to get lumped into the comedy category.
Yeah. Or they were a literal nighttime soap like Dallas, which
or Dynasty.
Dynasty.
This is a Dynasty house. This is a Dynasty house.
Eric loves Dynasty.
I have actual pillows. I've never talked about this on the podcast. My couch are actual Alexis and Crystal throw pillows. And people are like, is it okay if I sit on Alexis's face? And I'm like, Alexis would want you to sit on her face. And that's the truth. But all that said, moving on. HBO's The Sopranos, which won 2 Best Drama Series trophies, had more than enough bada bing to quit the Brits of PBS's Upstairs Downstairs, a 3-time drama series winner. Steve, you wanted to say something in defense of the many different stairs in the show.
Well, yeah, I just think that so many people don't even know what this show is, but without Upstairs Downstairs, we wouldn't have Gosford Park and we wouldn't have Downton Abbey. You know, it's the show that launched 1,000 shows, if you will, for sort of that British sector of what we view in America, at least used to be via Masterpiece Theater for the most part. And I just think it needs its due as the first drama that kind of made it stateside to really portray the class struggle between the upstairs and the downstairs, but yet to look at the lives very intricately of all of them. And I just think that a lot of people love Downton Abbey, and if they went and watched Upstairs Downstairs, I think they would find out that this is not a new concept.
Yeah, it's a great point. Do we know if that's streaming anywhere?
I don't.
You know what? You know where it might be, and I haven't. There's BritBox. I wonder if it's on BritBox.
Yeah,
I bet it is.
Do you know what we're gonna do?
You can watch it. It's on Amazon Prime.
Stop it! Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's amazing. I'd love to watch that. I actually have that. I mean, duh.
And on Hulu.
Okay, have Hulu too. And what we're going to do, folks, by the way, is we will, when we publish this on our website, we will actually show where you can watch these shows. I'm not going to remember saying that until I'm listening to this episode in my car and saying, oh, shit, I forgot to put those up. But I will. So give me like a week and we'll put that up there for you. So thank you, Steve. That's very helpful. We were not unanimous in our next matchup, with AMC's Breaking Bad, a 2-time winner, receiving 3/4 of the panel votes. But Kate wants to plead the case for NBC's Law and Order and its sole Best Drama Series victory. I will blow smoke for Walter White's cautionary tale, while Kate explains why Law and Order is more than just a patented procedural. And Kate, you're going to go first.
Talk about iconic.
Take a drink.
So, when I was kind of looking into Law and Order and thinking about how I was going to make this argument, and the way I made my arguments was, what is the influence of this show? And I did think about the whole show, not just the season that won. So that's really interesting that people mentioned that previously. So how does this show predict or influence the rest of television that came after it? What is the artistic achievement of the show itself, aesthetically? And then my own completely subjective feelings. So in terms of like influence, Law and Order's influence is so wild. For us to think about it being like an Emmy drama award winner, I was like, really? Because like so much of TV we think of now as these kind of prestige auteur shows that get the Emmy for Best Drama. But Law and Order, arguably, it's been on since 1990.
Yeah.
That's a long effing time. Has shaped so much about what we think procedural shows are, legal shows are, cop shows. Like it feels sort of like that's its defining first innovation. Like Dick Wolf was like, what if you had a cop show and a legal show? What if they were the same show? Chung chung. And like
the Reese's peanut butter cup of procedural television, ladies and gentlemen.
It's so brilliant. And like from so much sprang fully formed from the head of OG Law and Order, SVU, Criminal Intent. It ultimately gave us Mariska Hargitay as Olivia Benson and Chris Maloney as the internet's thirst object. And in the OG version, Jerry Orbach, Sam Waterston, so many incredible, Esapatha Murkison, so many incredible people. Could you criticize the show for the way that it upholds a cultural narrative that consistently humanizes policing forces without looking at policing itself as systemically oppressive, particularly of Black and brown communities? Oh, yes, you could. But all that to say, it is incredibly influential. I have watched so much Law and Order at the gym. It always soothes me and gives me probably too easily a feeling of law and justice being served and or not served. And those are my highly subjective feelings. Now, I think Law and Order as a defining influential force of television, I don't think you get Breaking Bad until you have Law and Order first. So think about that.
Fair point. I think that's an interesting, it's an interesting argument. I'm not sure I'm buying it, but I will say this. First of all, one of NBC's biggest mistakes in the history of that network was canceling original recipe Law and Order.
Well, now it's coming back.
I know
it's coming
back.
Yep.
But like, what were you thinking? Like, even if it's not doing well for a couple years, just do some casting changes and you're gonna figure it out. Like, that show had peaks and valleys before. Cutting bait on it, wild to me. And I remember at the time, literally, like pop culture critics being like, "You are so stupid. What are you doing?"
I'm sure it's partially because it's just like syndicated up the wazoo. It lost some of its like allure. This is just me like talking out of my butt. I don't actually know. You're right. Like, it is an institution, the way for better or for the worse. The Simpsons is an institution about American television.
They lost the casting magic for that show.
They did for a while.
It was just something. I don't know why, because maybe they were too focused on Law & Order SVU, but they had the same cast for a really long time. But even that show did a good job of like recasting folks for the most part.
Yes.
I'm still a Maloney fan, but Law & Order, like once you lost, obviously Jerry Orbach passed away, but like they were too hell-bent. Like, people wanted to leave that show because they were like, I'm going to be a movie star. Sorry, Benjamin Bratt, you weren't going to become a movie star. But like, I mean, you had him, you had Jesse L. Martin, you had all these like really talented, I say lean into your Broadway, New York-based people.
Yes.
Bring Sam Waterston back, make him the DA.
Yes.
Make it a New York. It is a New York show shot in New York. Make it
about the problems of policing and the law. You'll never get that from Dick Wolf, but do that and you've got a good show on your hands.
They had a real problem on that show with casting a second district attorney.
Yes.
They were trying. I don't like after Jill Hennessy left. Carrie Lowell was good.
She was great.
Angie Harmon was fine.
Yep.
But after that, holy moly, what were they doing?
Elizabeth Rum.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a lesbian. That's why you
I got
fired
fired.
me.
Is this because I'm a lesbian?
I'm a lesbian.
Chung chung.
Yep.
Terrible.
But all that being said, I actually think part of what makes Law and Order such a magical show was the fact that it was a rotating cast of characters.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
Like, just what a dumb decision to cancel that. And I do think it harms its legacy ultimately. But I'm here to talk about Breaking Bad. So why should Breaking Bad advance here? First, I will say because it came out of nowhere. Like, Vince Gilligan was not really a creator that people knew. He was not a known property. Like, before this show, he had just done some X-Files stuff and like the Lone Gunman spinoff, but he was not exactly like known as an auteur, right? And here comes this show on AMC, which had just started to become like legits with Walking Dead and Mad Men, and they were looking for like, we need to get some legs, we need another big one. And here comes this show about a school teacher who decides to become a meth kingpin. What? Like, and that's amazing, right? That's like high concept stuff. And it was so out of nowhere, but it was so good. And I think, frankly, and we were talking earlier, am I looking at the seasons that won or am I looking at the series as a whole? I'm looking at both because, in my opinion, Breaking Bad does not have a bad season. Breaking Bad is consistently good. It starts off a little bit shaky as, again, they're trying to figure out that tone, but then it gets harrowing towards the end. Once you bring in Gus, once you bring in, like, you start getting into the stuff with Saul and that whole
Mike Ehrmantraut.
like, it is terrific television. And I think what also makes it so special is you had career-defining roles for actors who had been around for a while in kind of a bunch of different places. Bryan Cranston was best known as the dopey dad on Malcolm in the Middle, and he became like a legit actor from this show. Aaron Paul, I think, was kind of like a second banana in some teen shows. Legit actor. Kristen Ritter got her start really with this show, in my opinion. Giancarlo Esposito, Jonathan Banks, Bob Odenkirk. I'm also going to give a shout out to Anna Gunn, who I think was really terrific in a role that many found to be unsympathetic. And I do think, looking back on that now, there's a lot of misogyny in the way people do.
Sure was.
Very ugly. And I think she's actually a very gifted actress and was excellent in that role. So for me, though, what is actually amazing about Breaking Bad, and I was seeing it while it was happening, I was like, all of these dumb white people are just like, yeah, Walter White, go. I'm like, you're rooting for Lex Luthor. You get that, right? Like, this is not, he's not the hero. He's not even an anti-hero. This is a show about a supervillain who, like, he's dealt a really crappy hand of cards, but he takes that and he breaks bad and basically becomes a terror for his community and destroys almost everything. His family, his friends. Everything.
Oh my God, Eric, it's your Emperor Palpatine argument all over again.
He's not intending to do that.
Literally coming back to bite you.
Exactly. But he didn't intend, like, his intention was not to become this drug kingpin. He kind of lucked into it. He just happened to be very good at it. Whereas Palpatine knew what he was doing. And that's why I maintain to this day, robbed Queen. But, you know, seriously, I always thought that the greatest trick that this show did was getting everybody to root for ultimately a truly bad human being. And no one, kind of like Dexter, like, I'm like, no, wait, like, at least Dexter was killing other bad people, but Walter White's concocting meth, which is being sold to kids. Like, let's look at this clearly. So for that reason, I think it is an amazing coup de grace of this show to kind of pull that off. And it's also a sad commentary on 21st century America. And for that reason, I think it's a fantastic Emmy winner. So
I thought you were going to say for meth you were going to vote for it, but that is also a good reason.
I'll pass on that one, but okay. I do want to go to votes. Steve, where are you on this?
I'm with you, Eric. I'm still with Breaking Bad. And actually, I just really want to quickly say, how has Better Call Saul never won an Emmy?
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's actually,
I know we're going backwards, but man, holy crap, I didn't even think about that. But no, I'm with Breaking Bad. Okay, you did a good job on Law and Order,
Thank
and I
you.
agree with you.
Thank you.
But is it the best drama? I don't know.
I guess I just think of Law and Order, as good as it is, as television Pringles, and I look at Breaking Bad as a supreme stuffed potato. That's how.
Yes, you are not wrong. You are not wrong. And
now I want a potato.
I'm gonna stick with Law and Order just because like the misogyny around Breaking Bad. I effing love this show, but like there's something about it that feels really gross to me now.
I get that.
Yeah. Even though it is an absolutely gorgeous, beautifully made, if we're talking about an aesthetic achievement, it's stunning.
It is.
Also, Danny Trejo's head on a fucking turtle. Oh my God. Like there's so many parts of this show that my jaw just hit the floor in terms of like, I can't believe this is what's happening on my television and I'm so in it. But yeah, I'm gonna stick with Law and Order just because.
Kevin Dillon.
I'm going to stick with Breaking Bad, but I do want to say and point out something that you said, Kate. I think the reason I like Better Call Saul better than Breaking Bad is because of the character of Kim Wexler is actually an agency-driven character, and it's like Vince Gilligan leveling up and understanding what he created with the toxicity or what came out of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's very passive, but yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, how does Rhea Seehorn not have an Emmy too?
Oh, don't even nominate her, you cowards. Emmy voters, if you're listening to this, I will come to your homes and I will scream at you. But yes, Breaking Bad.
Well, there you go. So we will advance Breaking Bad. I'm sorry, Kate. Law and Order
that's fine. It's fine.
Cha-chunged.
Cha-chung.
Next, we were unanimous in preferring NBC's ER with 1 win to Showtime's Homeland, also with 1 win. But Steve wanted to say something about Homeland, and we swear it is not a covert terrorist plot. I think, right, Steve? Great.
Well, I mean, I don't have an NSA clearance, but no, in all seriousness, Homeland was one of those shows that, like I talked about at the beginning, where it's hard to evaluate a show until it ends. And if we were basing this off of Homeland season 1, it was riveting. Yeah. I mean, Homeland season 1, everyone was talking about it, and Brody and all. The worst decision that show ever made was not killing Brody at the end of season 1. Yeah, I don't know what they were doing, but I mean, Damian Lewis, like, he was a real charmer. I get it. But holy, did that show fall off the rails. But yet, it doesn't discount the performances of Claire Danes or Mandy Patinkin or the other people, F. Murray Abraham, who were on that show and did great work. It was one of those shows that just didn't feel like it knew where to go after season 1. But I don't want to discount the fact that we don't have water cooler shows the way that we used to. And that was one of them. And I think it deserves a little recognition for that.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we did. I love that point about water cooler shows. I mean, obviously, in a work-from-home environment, I don't know how that works.
But no, Eric, what are you talking about? I have a water cooler in my house.
I think with binge TV, we lost that, right? Because you can just through the whole thing, and then people are like, but you don't have those weeks. I mean, like, what's going to happen? Like, I distinctly remember, we'll get there in a second, but having very intense conversations at Mass General Hospital about what's going to happen on Game of Thrones next week, right? And you don't get that with bingeable shows. And I think that,
Eric, if I may, to your point, that there are shows that deserve binging and there are shows that deserve some time to sit for a week. I just think back to your argument about Sense8 during the canceled too soon and how that might have done better at HBO. Yeah. And I think that that's a valid point, is sometimes you need that time in between episodes to really sit with something and think about it.
Yeah. It's like a stew. It needs to develop.
Yep. And
like
the Americans,
bourguignon, if you will.
The Americans is very much that kind of show. Like, you can't binge that show.
No.
And it's better if you don't binge that show.
That's true.
But you can binge Breaking Bad. I don't know what that's about. Yeah.
And most people did.
Yeah, I watched the whole thing in like a summer.
Yeah.
The thing with Homeland, jumping into this too, it's the only Showtime show on this list because Showtime is terrible and does run its shows into the ground.
Yes.
Showtime executives, please listen to this. Just because
all
a show
taking
is
notes.
popular for 1 or 2 seasons, Weeds, Dexter, I could go on and on.
United States of Terra.
United States of Terra. End it. It does not need to last more than 5 years. You can end a show, and the problem is they don't have auteur-driven dramas, and so this is the rare case of why correctly we are moving ER forward, even though it has its bad seasons. It's still better than it's sure better than Bad Homeland for me.
I think that it is a real statement if we're going to talk about a zombie show that doesn't know when to die, that we're saying that ER is the better zombie show that doesn't know when to die. But we'll get to that in round 2.
Yep.
So another ABC show, Hill Street Blues, a 4-time Best Drama winner, closed the hatch on ABC's Lost, which had just 1 win. Before we move on, I would like to pay a little homage to Lost, which I really did think had a profound impact on TV overall. I mean, you want to talk about appointment viewing, about water cooler shows. Holy shit, Lost, right? Like that first episode was unbelievable. I think it's it's still to this day is one of the best pilots I've ever watched.
Also one of the most expensive pilots.
Yes, yeah. And every cent of that was on screen. You could see it. I remember watching, being like, how did they shoot this? Like with the airline turbine on the beach, and I'm like, what? But it was this I think season 1 won, didn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
And rightfully as it should have, because season 1 probably was its best.
Yeah.
It had no idea where they were going.
The returns hadn't started to quite diminish. We were still like, what does it mean?
The 4-toed statues.
We were still wondering what's in the hatch.
Exactly. There was so much promise in season 1, and so very little of it came to mean anything. But that first season was excellent television, and I don't think we would have many of the shows that we had post that without Lost. It changed
for good or for ill. Yeah.
Right.
But in terms of like what is expected or what is possible in terms of ambition for television, like complete watershed moment.
100. And so after season 1, gets pretty dicey, but season 1 I do think is still deserving of a lot of the praise that it received. Next up, another unanimous victory with HBO's Game of Thrones, a 4-time Best Drama series, conquering the quaint and quirky small town crimes of CBS's Picket Fences, a 2-time winner. Anybody want to say anything in defense of Picket Fences?
I will. That was like the first like adult show that I felt like I watched as a kid. Like for me, I loved Kathy Baker. I loved Tom Skerritt. I thought like there's something indelible about a David E. Kelly drama. Honestly, it's so wordy and we'll talk about it when we talk about The Practice. But there's just like it's such a writerly show. Like the five-ish Finkel character, so fantastic. And you had just this like, there was like a depth to it and a quirk and heart, and it balanced all of those pretty well in the beginning, and it was a solid show. It is that very peak early 90s like transition from like the 80s dramas that were winding down into the early 90s dramas that were starting to pick up, and where I think a lot of shows like that were leaning into, like that or Sisters or things like that, where it was like
Sisters. Oh
I know, I love that show so much.
Obsessed.
Was Northern Exposure after or concurrent with Picket Fences?
I think concurrent. Before and through, like they were kind of connected. Didn't Northern Exposure win Best Drama too?
It did. I think it actually won more than once. It didn't make our lists, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just those types of shows that were maybe that earnestness of the 90s is very there.
With a little like Twin Peaks too, right? They're like,
so
tell me
Twin
about
Peaks.
this small town that's got something else going on.
Yep.
But with a lot less like
menace,
red rooms and
yeah.
like
Actually, that's a great point. Picket Fences is CBS's Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Like it's their version of it. Yeah, that's really what it is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kevin. Finally, in round one, we were evenly split between the ethically questionable lawyers of ABC's The Practice, a 2-time winner, and the ethically questionable cops of ABC's NYPD Blue, a 1-time winner. Kevin, speak legalese and plead The Practice to the jury. Steve, get grim and gritty with Sipowicz and NYPD Blue. And I'm going to have Steve go first.
Well, Eric, you made my point. I mean, it was really the precursor to Gritty. Like, it really felt like this was the first show that really leaned into a darker tone as far as police dramas went. I mean, there were other shows that had darker moments, but this really leaned into a darker tone. It was like the first cop show that didn't really glorify the police force in the same way that other cop shows prior to that did. And frankly, I think Sipowicz was almost our first anti-hero in a way. You know, like he really didn't fit the mold of what we thought of as like a drama best actor or lead actor, I should say. You know, he had flaws, like real flaws, and struggled throughout the course of the series. And I loved NYPD Blue, but I would also like to take a spite moment to talk about The Practice.
Oh boy!
Eddie is Eric's
that was an
signature color.
actively bad show. Like, what I don't get. I mean, these characters aren't likable. They're pious.
Perfect.
But it's not likable as an anti-hero. I mean, they're just like, I didn't even care about them. Like, they were just, I just, and as that series went on, it just got really soapy. And I mean, listen, I'll be honest with you. Like, I'm not the world's biggest David Kelly fan. Like, I'm just not. It's just not my cup of tea. And I'm not belittling him. I get the merits of like you were saying, Kevin, like a talky drama. And I loved The West Wing, which we'll talk about later. But like, I don't know. I just never got on board. And then James Spader got on board, and my God, I just couldn't. I really couldn't. And I tried to like the show. Like, I was someone at the time that show was on that wanted to be a lawyer, and now am a lawyer. And I couldn't with The Practice. There was something about Dylan McDermott and Cameron Manheim, and I just couldn't get behind it. So I definitely am behind NYPD Blue on this one.
I would like to say that on a personal note, I would love to get either behind or in front of Dylan McDermott.
100%.
Whichever way he wants to do it.
Just do it in a rubber suit.
Especially modern day Dylan McDermott.
I'm fine with that. Rubber suit, whatever. No,
he's on a very good aging plan.
He is absolutely. But I'm talking even back to Steel Magnolias, because Jackson was a fine and hanging man. All right. Kevin Dillon, take it away.
Well, so I actually watched the first season of The Practice recently because I was like, I know we're going to talk about this show, and I remember liking it. But it's the only show on the list where I was like, I need to go back. I'll be honest, I really rarely watched NYPD Blue. It was not a show for me. I never got into it. I just never did. I was always an ER person, and to be honest with you, I thought NYPD stole a lot of ER Emmys. That's me. But I think for me, The Practice was the last network drama to make an impact here. It was David E. Kelly trying to save network dramas. Like, he was doing his edgy thing that he does, making the quirk come out. And that's the thing that stands out in this show as well. The show starts with these rough and tumble, like, lawyers who really are super they're not taken seriously. They run a practice for folks who are in and out of the carceral system and whatnot. But again, it goes back to that thing that David E. Kelly heart. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into defending folks who may not have the best defense possible. And I think that it was ahead of its time in like the way it looks at the legal system. And I thought it was really good and fun. And I do think it was well acted Dylan, you made my points for me. Dylan McDermott, Cameron Manheim, Michael Badalucco, Laura Flynn Boyle, Stephen Harris, Holland motherfucking Taylor as a judge. As a judge, and Emmy winner. One of, I think, the best Emmy wins that they've ever given, because she was essentially a guest star and won for that role. And she was so good. And you had these wild guest stars like John Larroquette, who was essentially like a serial killer who was like kind of stalking the law firm. So you had the absurdity and like the fun mixed in with it. They did a crossover with Ally McBeal. I will say for this, I go back and forth on how I'm judging, and I'll name that for folks because I'll say I think both shows went off the rails. You know, both shows both shows lost their stride. Yeah, the James Spader years of The Practice, they suck. I couldn't. He's always playing the same person now. It's not fun.
Yeah, he's playing James Spader.
Every role is Ultron.
Yeah,
exactly. It's literally that. You're 100% right.
Somehow we all hated him as Ultron. How did that happen? Like, he was cast for the role he always plays, and yet somehow we all hated it.
But as Ultron, all I could hear was James Spader. So
yeah.
Yep.
I think for me with this, even though I do think The Practice stole one of the Sopranos Emmys, and they should have one win. But I think both shows represent interesting pieces. I hear your points about NYPD Blue they really took, they're the same creator, Stephen Bochco, who did Hill Street Blues. He took his own tentpole and made it that gritty, more realistic thing. I think The Practice did the same thing for the legal drama. It took basic structures of the legal show and made it grittier and weirder, and LA Law, right? And crossover with Ally McBeal. They did a crossover episode with Ally McBeal, and who can't like that? But I think
it's worth revisiting Ally McBeal of the 2020s. That's probably not going to go.
That's probably true. Oh, damn it.
But I do want to put this one to a vote. Kate, where are you on this?
So between the two of these, I actually didn't watch either of these shows. I've never seen a single episode of either of these shows, but based on my rubric of influence, aesthetic achievement, personal, whatever, influence, NYPD Blue was the first TV show that had butts.
Yeah. Male butts.
So butts.
Sure.
Wins by a butt.
That's a good point.
That is a good point.
It's funny when Steve was making his
butts and swearing too, right? Wasn't there they said shit and stuff? Yeah,
that's true. They did swear too. Yep. I will say this, that Steve was making his argument. It was a very good argument, but I realized without Sipowicz, do we get Tony Soprano? I'm not sure.
True. Yeah. You're not wrong on that. You're not wrong.
I think that really helped break the mold on what a leading actor could look like in a prestige drama. And that anti-hero, I think, has then, arguably, you could argue that Dylan McDermott's character is itself a bit of an anti-hero.
Yep.
So I think you have to give it to NYPD Blue there, with the understanding that that show really does go off the rails in a very real way. And I'm not giving it for anything having to do with David Caruso. I never got the David Caruso thing. Not ever.
No. Nope.
But it is.
He's great in session 9, but nope.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to advance to NYPD Blue, and that is it for round 1. We're going to take a quick break before returning with our ultimately unsatisfying conclusion that will never live up to this episode's early promise. We will be right back. Welcome back to round 2 of our Best Emmy winner for Best Drama Series debate. While we were gone, the producers replaced Eric with James Spader. We're sure you won't mind. Before we get into the arguments, I'd like to ask my panel where people can find you on social media. Kate, take it away.
So I'm on Twitter as myself, @KateRaculia, though I'm not really on Twitter that much because mental health. Or if you want to look at pictures of my cats on Instagram, they're Gomez Rack, and they're real cute.
They are adorable. Kevin, how about yourself?
You can find me on Twitter @ETKevinsMind, or you can find me on Instagram @Kevin_Dylan_23.
Great. And how about you, Steve?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram @SNikoloff, NIKOLOFFESQ. But I don't post a lot, but you can certainly yell at me if you'd like to.
Come for me, but you better be ready when you find me. I think that's my tagline for the Real Housewives episode.
There you go.
Yeah, it is.
I actually think it is.
It is.
And for me, you should definitely follow at Great Pop Culture Debate on Instagram and at culture_debate on Twitter. But you can feel free to follow at Eric Resniak. That is ERIC. REZ as in zebra, S as in snake, N as in Nancy, YAK on both Twitter and the Instagram. So again, in a first for this podcast, the panel was unanimous in the majority of the round 2 decisions, but we're still going to talk about it because that's what we do with the good television. So first up in actual debate, 3/4 of the panel is pushing Mad Men out of the Madison Avenue window and into the semifinals, but Steve wants to play politics by voting for the West Wing. Steve, you don't need to walk, but I do need you to talk about why you are a wingman. I will explain why I prefer to ride Don Draper's carousel any day. And yes, that is 100% a euphemism for John Hamm's nether regions. Steve, you go first.
I honestly don't know what people were smoking with Mad Men. I just never understood that show. But I'm going to start with my pros on The West Wing, because The West Wing is probably my favorite show in this whole bracket. Like I loved The West Wing, and it came out right at the right time for me. I was in college in the late 90s, and that's when this show came out, and we had West Wing Wine Wednesday. So there's a bit of a nostalgia factor, but going to the actual show, like, it was great. And okay, I will be the first to admit that seasons 1 through 4, when Aaron Sorkin was there, were by far the best, and season 5 was a mess. But season 6 and 7, when Alan Alda showed up and Jimmy Smith showed up, and we had an actual campaign, I feel like the show found its footing again, and it had fun characters, it had great actors. I mean, how many West Wing actors won an Emmy? I mean, I can't even count them on one hand. I mean, it was all of them, and except for poor Martin Sheen. I don't understand that, but to this day.
That's crazy.
And, yeah,
It's
he was
weird.
like the only one. And Rob Lowe, but look, in today's world, I know that the West Wing seems a little schlocky given the political climate that we're in, but it was supposed to be a bit of a salve on the George W. Bush administration when it was written. And that's where we are. And the last thing I'll say about the West Wing is it's so rewatchable. Everyone rewatches the West Wing. I mean, my gosh, HBO made a whole live episode of one of the episodes of the West Wing. And I don't know who sits and rewatches Mad Men. I mean, other than Eric to watch John Hamm, but I don't know what.
I
have. So many times.
Look, Mad Men was visually stunning, and I loved some of the episodes of that show, but just as a whole, I just didn't understand the character of Don Draper. Like, I just didn't fully understand whether we were supposed to root for him or against him. Was he a hero?
Indeed.
Anti-hero? And also, I actually think that Mad Men was a bit of Peggy's story.
Indeed.
Don Draper's.
Yes.
And I just thought that muddied the storyline a lot. I wasn't sure where to go with Mad Men. And frankly, I'll also say, and then I'm done, is God, some of those storylines were so slow. Like, Matt Weiner. What was his? Matt Weiner?
Weiner.
Yeah.
Weiner?
Yeah.
Weiner. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, those next episode ons were epic, but also like, I don't know. I just didn't fully get Mad Men. Maybe that's just me.
Well, I want to say, first of all, it was an excellent argument for the West Wing because you made several very good points. And I do think of all the Sorkin shows, it is by far his most successful.
Absolutely.
By a wide mile. I actually love the fact that it's a little bit schlocky at this point. I think there's a nostalgia factor there. And it also will 100% back up your argument that there are people who watch West Wing over and over and over again. It is a comfort show for people.
I'm one of them.
Yeah. It's like a safety blanket almost. There's something about it that really resonates and feels wholesome to people in a way. This is such a bad comparison, but I'm going to make it anyway. It's almost like the American equivalent of the Great British Bake Off for people. Like, you just put it on and you feel better about life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going to say. Regarding Mad Men, I love Mad Men, and I 100% do get Mad Men. And you are correct that, are we supposed to root for Don Draper or not? That is one of the central questions. Who is Don Draper? Don Draper doesn't exist. He's completely made up. And not to get all highfalutin, but I actually wrote this up. So I'm actually going to read my notes.
Do it.
Go for it.
I know.
We love preparation.
We love preparation H specifically.
I gotta say that.
I stole your joke. Sorry. Yay, logic. Let me start by saying Mad Men was a huge bet for everybody involved. It was a period piece starring largely unknown talent, and it was about advertising. Do you know who cares about in the inner workings of the advertising world? Literally no one who does not work in the advertising world. Nobody cares. It's kind of like journalism. How many journalism shows actually are successful, right? But of course, it was about so much more than advertising. It was a pointed critique of post-World War II America and the massive cultural shifts that were going on in the 50s through the 60s. For all the progress that was made, there was an equal pushback by the establishment, which is kind of the undercurrent of Mad Men, right? Like, we get Dawn into the system as their first Black secretary, and immediately she is meant to feel like an outsider and just absolutely terrible over and over and over again. And that's just one example. But those were the parts of Mad Men that really slapped me in the face. I remember going home for Thanksgiving the year the first was on, and I was saying to my father about the show, were people really so openly anti-Semitic in the 1950s? And he's like, oh my God, constantly. Are you kidding me? We would just say that stuff out loud. And I am using the we there to refer to him. That is deliberate. It was kind of rediscovering, ripping down that wallpaper that we all like to look at as that nostalgia 1950s.
Yes.
And really examining what the reality was like for middle-class America, which is another really important part of why I think Mad Men was important. It captures the middle class, and that no longer exists in the 21st century. The middle class life that exists in Mad Men was not possible pre-Mad Men, and it's no longer possible in America. That's fascinating. And to me, one of the parts, and I'm totally just lost my part in my script because I was ad-libbing. There we go. So it is a very personal story about one man, or a shell of a man, who basically cons his way into this incredible career and a life he throws away more than once. But what I found so fascinating about the show over and over and over again was how it told that story of America at its peak, warts and all. And you mentioned that it's also a Peggy story. It is. It's 100%. As much as it's Dawn's story, it's Peggy's story. And frankly, it's also little Sally Draper's story.
Sally!
Like
Sabrina.
There's so many amazing arcs in this show. You mentioned how it's gorgeous, the mid-century sets, the clothes, the people. We can go on about the cast, but I'm rambling and we're running out of podcasts. So I'm going to throw it to votes. Kevin, what do you think?
Oh, I'm Mad Men. I think it's an exquisite show. It's top tier for me.
All right, Kate?
Mad Men. It's one of my top 3 favorite shows of all time.
So, Steve, are you going to be incredibly upset? Because I know West Wing was your ultimate winner.
But at the same point in time, like, I'll be honest, if Mad Men had featured Peggy instead of Dawn, I probably would have loved it.
But would people have watched it is the question. And
he's the Trojan. Hard. He's the Trojan mid-century man.
Yeah. No, I will not be upset. Mad Men was a great show.
Great. Thank you for being a good sport. Next, in a crookout, the panel unanimously agreed that HBO's The Sopranos should keep on believing as it dragged AMC's Breaking Bad out to the Pine Barrens. Another unanimous victory as ER proved the superior NBC drama, defunding the police of Hill Street Blues. And finally, in round 2, a third unanimous victory, this time with HBO's Game of Thrones, raining blood and fire down on NYPD Blue.
Kind of like to really imagine them fighting each other.
Absolutely. I actually, that is some fan fiction that needs to happen right there. Sipowicz versus Rhaegar Targaryen.
Butts on butts.
Just wait for House of Dragons or whatever that's called.
Yes. I hope that they find some wig moisturizer between the trailer and that show. Because I was just like,
woo, crispy.
Go to any drag queen's closet in WeHo, and you are going to find better wigs, ladies and gentlemen. So with that said, we are at a final 4 of The Sopranos versus Mad Men and ER versus Game of Thrones. I always like to take a step back here and see if that makes sense to me. I think the fact that 3/4 of those are premium cable show actually does make sense.
Yeah. Yep.
given how cable really transformed what we think of as prestige TV in the past 20 years. Like, I was making the list of all the shows that have ever won, and it was really gobsmacking the massive jump that started to happen in the 90s. But then you get to the 2000s, and holy cats, it's like a completely different ballgame.
It's a seismic shift. Yeah.
Well, ER, The Practice, and The West Wing were the last ones to win from broadcast. Not the last ones to win, but the last like dynasty of broadcast. That was
It's so true. And those are all great examples of tremendous broadcast television. They really are. The fourth, speaking of which, the fourth is one of the longest running dramas in TV history, which was itself prestige for at least the first half of its run. So personally, I dig it, even if it is strange to me that like one of these shows only won the Best Drama Series award one time. That's interesting to me that we got someone into that final that it only won once. So
who only won the one time?
ER.
It only won 1 year.
What?
I think it was season 2.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was season 2.
That was the Doug Ross tracheotomy season, I bet.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the fact that it only has 2 wins.
Speaking of which, let's get to these what is it, the quarterfinals? Yeah, I know sports. So
the quarterfinals.
The Sopranos versus Mad Men. I'm going to go around the horn here first. Kevin, where are you on this?
This is a really hard one, to be honest with you, for me, because I think they're both excellent shows. Both actually Matthew Weiner involved in both of them. And in fact, Matthew Weiner was involved for The Sopranos wins, which I think is a testament to his capability to elevate and create some of the best television drama of all time. I am going to ultimately go with The Sopranos, largely because I think the sum total of its parts is what created the modern cable drama series and created the blueprint for what we have. These two, in all honesty, would be my final 2 if they were in different. Like, these would be, I think, the 2 that I'd be wrestling with in the end if there were no brackets, if you will. So like for me, they're the best 2 that exist. And I think they're just really, really great representations of humanity, and its flaws and all its nuts and bolts. But I'm going to go Sopranos.
Okay. Steve, how about you?
Well, I mean, I think I've made my thoughts on Mad Men known. So, next week on Kevin Dillon, look for The Sopranos, but I'm also going with The Sopranos.
All right, Kate.
So here's where I admit that I've literally never seen a single episode of The Sopranos.
No, and the podcast.
I know.
Don't even know. I watched the what's that new movie called? It's escaping me. I watched it on the first
Many
weekend.
Saints of Newark.
Many Saints of Newark. Thank you.
Yep. In some ways, like I just didn't have access to HBO when it was on, and like I've kind of been saving it for myself. I'm sure I will absolutely love it, but in my special sauce of influentialness, aesthetic object.
You lived next to New Jersey.
Well, not when it was happening. I was in Boston.
Still closer to New Jersey.
I know, honestly, but it just Mad Men speaks to my soul. I have rewatched seasons of Mad Men, whole seasons, multiple times. It is in the same way that Dick Wolf put together a cop show and a legal show. This is a period drama and a serial drama, right? And I think what makes this show feel different to me, in comparison to a Breaking Bad, right? Which we can see why whoever was making decisions at AMC picked up these 2 shows almost simultaneously, right? That it has this kind of real hard aesthetic vision and style and setting, and is about this sort of slippery white male main character, which I think in some ways, and I know it's not fair to The Sopranos, that I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch another anti-hero story, but I'm kind of weary to start that show, which I know is unfair. But anyway, what I think feels so different about Mad Men is I never even feel as though it is passively valorizing him in some ways. It always kind of knows he's an asshole,
yeah,
and always kind of fair. Has all these other characters. Peggy is in it
from the beginning in just as much of a way, and Joan is, and there's all of this incredible cast of characters and people in this place and time that is about mid-century America. It is about a time when middle-class aspirational American dream was something you could actually achieve during a time of great social change. It is also very much about post 9/11 America.
Mm-hmm.
Another time of like conservatism contracting against great social change. But it's also, because it's about advertising, it's about capitalism too, and how so much of America's false sense of itself was sold to itself.
Yeah.
Like explicitly sold to itself by skilled artists. And that is madness, right? Like Mad Men is not just Madison Avenue. It's about the American madness. And it's so beautiful. I loved reading Tom and Lorenzo's fashion recaps of every episode. And Janie, I can't think of her last name, but the costume designer, like how much thought went into every single piece of clothing that everyone was wearing. Matthew Weiner lists Alfred Hitchcock as a major cinematic influence. Wong Kar-wai is a major cinematic influence. Like, it's just such an unbelievably gorgeous, rich text that like is not really... It is about the rot and how we think about what we think the past was, right? The American misconception of who we are and what our past was and what that means about who we are. Now, could I, like, knowing that Matthew Weiner went like from Sopranos to this, right? Like, Sopranos is still kind of the like seed for where Mad Men came from. And I found a quote where he was actually talking about how no spoilers, whatever, it's been years, but the baby that Peggy has at the end of the first season that she gives up for adoption, and like just, you know, Don holds her hand and says it will, it's something like, it will amaze you how much this never happened, or it will shock you how much this never happened. It's such a, speaking of writerly shows and that weird pacing and like that it's so literary in the way that it unfolds. Anyway, that was an idea that Matthew Weiner got after working on The Sopranos and seeing kind of what The Sopranos was capable of presenting psychologically, narratively. So that's kind of part of my argument. But the other thing too I want to talk about is that Mad Men is one of the great prestige 21st century memeable shows. This show lives in memes forever. Not great, Bob. Like,
deal with it.
Yeah, and the way people, it, you know, for a show that is about surfaces, its surface kind of really speaks to 21st century internet culture in a really interesting way. And that I think is why it is such a rich text and why it is one of my favorite shows of all time. Mad Men.
So you're voting for Sopranos. No, I'm just kidding. This is going to be a weird argument and people are going to get mad at me. Which show do I personally like more? Mad Men. Which show do I think is a more interesting and more resonant show? For me, Mad Men. Which show am I going to put forward here? Sopranos. Why? Not because I don't want to have a tie, but I also don't want to have a tie in the final. But also in terms of its impact on the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
You cannot undercount how big of a change Sopranos made for television. It blew the doors wide open. And I've said this on other episodes before, that mobster shows and movies genuinely just do not interest me. There's something about it. It's like sports. I'm just like, oh yay, male pain, great. But I obviously Sopranos deals with it in a much more interesting way with many more layers, complicated characters. It's it's stylistic in its own way. Is it as stylistic as Mad Men? It's not even in the same zip code. It's not in the same, Italian province. But I think that it is, for when it came out, very stylistic. And I think the fact that it's so open to interpretation and people were able to project themselves, perhaps to their detriment culturally, in a lot of these characters, it really, just as much as Mad Men resonates with the post-war America, and I think, Kate, you make a great point how it also was echoed in a post-9/11 America.
Yep.
Sopranos really resonates very much with the generations we're dealing with right now. There's a lot of truth there. So for that reason, I am moving forward Sopranos, even though of the two, I would much prefer to watch Mad Men. That's just me personally. So that is 3-1 Sopranos. Moving on, it's ER versus Game of Thrones. I want to start with Kate.
I'm going to give it to ER.
You are wild, but go on.
I know. I'm a chaos agent.
Yep.
So ER, I remember also, it's kind of a very early show for when I started to be, conversant in pop culture, writing for HJ, which now I'm like, HJ, did we think about that acronym?
I certainly did.
I was innocent. Anyway, it was the name of it was written by teenage high schoolers in the area where Eric and I grew up. Eric and I were both HJ writers. But that was such a defining, moment for me to be a teen reporter, to be able to write about culture and stuff. So anyway, I knew what ER was, and it was like ER and Chicago Hope are coming out at the same time. Who's going to win? Obviously ER. But it was just everybody watched it, and it was such a beautifully made cinematic show that had all these different characters and all these different stories. I just think that it really, in terms of what TV looked different after ER too, right?
Sure.
It looked different in terms of how complex, of a story people could get into for years and years and years. Yes, it did kill what's his face with a helicopter, and oh my fucking god,
amazing.
It was kind of amazing. And so I think that I'm saying ER over Game of Thrones, because I think Game of Thrones is ER with tits and dragons. It's in terms of the sort of
and better written women.
Yes. Yes. And just Game of Thrones, I fell down that hole just like everybody else. But I'll tell you what, I got to the episode where Jaime and Cersei, after their kid died, Joffrey, which was amazing. I stuck in to see Joffrey die, and I just they're like, oh, this is kind of rapey, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to watch this, and I stopped, and I didn't miss anything, and I feel like in terms of Game of Thrones looked effing incredible. It looked incredible, but diminishing returns up the wazoo. So, and ER went on way too long, but in terms of a thing that employed a lot of people for 2 decades, I just think it's a more impressive achievement to me.
Interesting.
Television. Yeah.
As always, Kate, you make the hottest takes, and I'm always so glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Steve, your take.
Well, I think
also George Clooney. Sorry, George George fucking Clooney.
Sure.
I think that going to what Eric said, Game of Thrones. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and defend the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones, but I don't think Kate's going to sit here and defend the last few seasons of ER.
10,
and
I'll go and say.
Yeah.
No, but the helicopter death occurred in there, and I will defend that until the day I die.
But what I will say is Game of Thrones really threw the doors open in a way that hadn't been done before for a different genre of show. It wasn't a law show. It wasn't a mob show. It wasn't a politics show. It wasn't a police show. It was a genuine fantasy. And, listen, I will be the first to acknowledge that season... was it 8? I think 8.
7 or 8?
A nightmare. I don't know. If you read the books, I'm not going to go in the books. I'm not that guy. But my point ultimately being is that the first couple seasons of Game of Thrones were phenomenal. Yes, okay, Kevin, I hear what you're saying about women being written poorly, but we also have to talk about time periods and things like that. But also, going back to what we were talking about before, who wasn't talking about Game of Thrones at some point at the quote unquote water cooler, even if it was in your home? It was a real zeitgeist. Frankly, I think it's going to be the last water cooler show that we ever have. I think
don't know.
What's that?
I don't know about that. I think that's giving Game of Thrones way too much credit, I think.
I just think that in this world of binge television, it's harder for everyone to be at the same place at the same time on the same series to talk about a show without spoiling. I'm even just thinking about Ted Lasso. I'm ahead of my friends who are behind. My point ultimately being is that this was appointment television, and people really rewatched it, and my gosh, if you didn't have a party when the season premiere of 2 or 3 of Game of Thrones came on, I just think that it really opened some doors in a way that the Emmys hadn't in a while, of a show that was really in the zeitgeist. And so I think that ER is a great show. Look, I'm not going to knock it. I watched ER. I loved it. But I really think that Game of Thrones was a different kind of show that finally won an Emmy. And we had, other kinds like it. But I just think that it really, all the downside aside, and there's a lot of downside, but at the same point in time, it was different.
Yeah, agreed completely. Kevin.
Oh, ER. Sorry.
ER,
hands down. Sorry. Yeah, no. Game of Thrones is a fine show. The fact that it has won 4 times though is wild to me. I think
And ER won what?
I'll give you that. It shouldn't have won 4 times.
Maybe deserving of 1 win.
It shouldn't be on the same level as LA Law and Mad Men and all that, and West Wing. It shouldn't be on there.
Wild. I think ER is actually the show that should have 4 wins between the two of them, because and it only has 1. Because that, let me tell you, you want to talk about appointment television? That show was appointment television.
We were talking about it in middle school.
Yep, when Kelly Martin gets killed, when Dr. Green dies in Hawaii, The Flood with George Clooney, Juliana Margulies and her drug problem.
Yep. I remember watching that George Clooney tracheotomy episode. I remember watching it.
Noah Wiley and Eric LaSalle creating that teacher-mentor relationship, while Eric LaSalle being that assertive teacher who's like, I'm going to make you better by being harder on you. Laura Ennis and her being that pre-Bailey from Grey's Anatomy.
So true.
You had all of these people, and then even the next generation, when it took its shift and some of those folks left, you then veered into Gloria Rubens and
Alex Kingston.
Alex Kingston, Maura Tierney, and Sally Fields. It is some of the best acting I've ever seen in television drama. It's so epically good, and it's a show I honestly keep meaning to go back and rewatch. I just don't want to cry. I'll be honest, and I know I will. It was my favorite drama growing up. It's why I was shading NYPD Blue before, because they won all them damn Emmys, and I'm like, you were fine, guys, I guess, but ER's right there. And it advanced the hospital drama to the nth degree. It wasn't oh my God, Timmy's gonna cut. What are we gonna do? It's no. This is what an ER is like. And this is how we navigate that. And Kyle Richards was a nurse as an extra. So by that principle, ER, baby. No, it's just a great show.
I hear the theme song, and when it's just such a, and then you see Eric LaSalle doing the fist pump.
Yep. It was actually nominated. The series finale was actually nominated for Best Writing.
I remember watching that too. I don't remember what happened. I remember Carter was old.
They all came back and they donated money to keep the hospital going.
I mean, and as Kate and I, who both worked in healthcare fundraising, can attest, thank you, donors.
Thank you, donors.
Thank you. But okay, let me say this. Going into this matchup, I was like, this is so clearly Game of Thrones. And I think Kate and Kevin have made excellent points. But Kevin made an interesting statement where he said that the acting was epically good. I don't understand how we were having this discussion and the term epic is being applied to ER and not to Game of Thrones, which is, in my opinion, the most epic show of the past 20 years at least. I hear your criticisms about the women being poorly written, and I'm going to respectfully disagree.
Also just the top, there's just a lot, there's just a lot of rapiness.
But if I may, Eric, and I apologize for interrupting you.
No, you're fine.
If I made a Kevin's point of water cooler moments, if you want to talk about water cooler moments, like the helicopter crash, I mean, when Ned Stark was beheaded, or the Red Wedding. I mean, there are YouTube threads that are solely devoted to people watching the Red Wedding for the first time.
If ER was around when Twitter was around, it would be the same thing.
I'm just saying there are water cooler moments in Game of Thrones too.
Absolutely, and I would argue there are as many water cooler moments in Game of Thrones with probably an eighth of the episode count as there are in all of ER. And it's a little bit unfair to compare these two, right? Because
it's tough.
ER had like 9,000 episodes and Game of Thrones had like, I think 80. But pound for pound, which show is better? I'm going to go back to my point. About the women characters are poorly written. This is fantasy. And as someone who's read the books and watched the show, I argue that there are many very well written and drawn female characters in that show.
Cersei Lannister, just for one, until the very end.
I think they were arguing that Cersei is a poorly written female character.
Oh, I disagree.
I actually think she's the best written character.
Yeah, I think she's the best one.
I think she's great. Brienne of Tarth is amazing. Fucking Arya is incredible. The arc that you get with Sansa is amazing. By the way, shameless plug, if you have not listened to our season 1 episode of Best Game of Thrones Character, go check that out, because we really get into it. But I really don't think that I think, frankly, if we're going to talk about recency bias here, I think there is such a knee-jerk reaction to anti-Game of Thrones because of that last season. People fucking hate that show right now. And
that's not why I'm voting against it. I actually liked the last season, so you're not losing me there.
You know I will defend that last season, besides the pacing, which is a problem, but in terms of like the actual what happens in it, I have no problems with that. I actually think it works completely with the narrative. And if you disagree, I don't think you were paying attention. That's just my opinion. But I'm not going to discount the arguments made by Team ER here, because you make some very good ones where, like Kate, I was obsessed with that show in high school. Like I watched every episode. I was like total ride or die ER for at least the first 7 seasons. I never missed an episode. And
me too. And I'm arguing for Game of Thrones too, but me too. I love that show.
I just think in terms of the overall scope and achievement, what Game of Thrones did is on a completely different level. ER changed the game. No question. Was it Kevin said that it leveled up hospital dramas?
Yep.
But I think it's been one-upped already. I think Grey's Anatomy has one.
Oh, no. ER's way better than... No. You can't... Those two are like... That's like comparing... No. No. I'm sorry. The Grey's Anatomy musical episode begs to differ.
I think if you're trying to say that ER was not a soap in Scrubs... I think that is false.
But an elevated and well-written soap and Scrubs.
Okay, fair.
It was Dallas. ER was Dallas and Dynasty.
Yes.
Grey's is like Models Inc. Models Inc. Sorry, no shade, but
well,
it was
you know
like
what
Models
it is?
Inc.
ER is the soap, but it's a workplace drama. It's the West Wing. That's right. What ER sets up.
It does have a lot in common with the West Wing. That's true.
Yep.
Game of Thrones is also a workplace drama. It's just that the workplace happens to be a medieval kingdom involving dragons. Where was Osha at the wall? That's all I have to say.
Oh my god, hilarious! I can't.
HR should have been involved with the White Walkers. We could have saved a lot of trouble.
I'm still ride or die with ER in terms of I just like it better. It's in another universe, like it better. But there is something to be said in terms of like a filmmaking, TV making achievement. It's different.
Yes.
It's a different scale. It's sort of like, what if the New Adventures of Hercules was at a degree of writing and filmmaking?
But it's not just that. It's also the fact that my God, we had St. Elsewhere, we had Chicago Hope, we had ER. They're not all the same quality. What I'm saying is Game of Thrones was so different.
And it has spawned an entire new, we've got the Lord of the Rings show that's coming up on Amazon.
Unfortunately, a little bit, to be honest. Like, this is my problem with shows like Game of Thrones. They always spawn, and it's my problem with Lost. They always spawn these knockoffs that are just
not as good.
Not good.
The Boston Legals of Game of Thrones.
Exactly.
We don't know that yet. Would we have
Eric,
something?
look at the wigs. Eric, look at the wigs.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Have
Thank you.
Lovecraft Company. Lovecraft Country, if we didn't have Game of Thrones. Would we have Watchmen?
That's true.
If we didn't have Game of Thrones?
Watchmen.
I don't know that those are
we would have Watchmen. Watchmen's more of a comic book drama than it is a fantasy drama.
But
I feel like
my argument against that is that those shows center on blackness.
Sure.
Game of Thrones definitely does not center on blackness.
It most certainly does not. Yes.
No.
Okay, so are we at a stalemate here? Steve, are you sticking with your choice?
You know what? Honestly, I am. And I don't want a stalemate because I think both of these shows are excellent, and I already know who I'm voting for in the next round.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter.
That's true. That's true.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that's a great question here. Let's say we give a bye to these two shows, and it's actually a final three of ER versus Game of Thrones versus Sopranos. Let's just have that philosophical rhetorical moment, right? By the way, if you're listening, the minisodes this happens every time with the minisodes.
It does.
There are no
ranking.
seeds. That's right. There's no seeds, and they're all very intensely personal decisions. And
true.
It used to drive me crazy, but now I actually respect it, and it means that people are invested in what we're talking about. So I'm gonna ask the panel. Let's say it's those final three. It's Sopranos, ER, Game of Thrones. Kate, which one are you going with?
Despite of the three, the show that I like the best is ER. I would vote for The Sopranos.
Kevin?
Sopranos.
Steve?
Yeah, it changed the game, The Sopranos.
That's exactly what, and that was my final pick too.
Yep.
And I think that is, I'm going to call it a draw for ER versus Game of Thrones. I think they are both really excellent shows. And
look at you, Kofi Annan.
If you see Cersei, tell her it was me. I want her to know.
Shame.
R.I.P. Diana Rigg.
Oh God. But no, I think that is the correct way to move forward here with The Sopranos as our unanimous winner. And I think
it's the right choice.
I feel good about it.
It's the right choice. So there you have it, folks. Our pick for the best Emmy winner for best drama is The Sopranos. Do you agree with our choice? Do you demand an audit from the accounting firm Ernst & Young? Let us know your pick by leaving a comment on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com or yell at us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. While you're there, make sure you like and subscribe for more Great Pop Culture Debate content. Thank you to my panelists. I would name all of you in my Emmy acceptance speech, and God help the sound producer who dares to play me off. Thanks Steve in particular for being an amazing Patreon supporter and for sponsoring this episode. And thank you for listening. Until next time, remember, everyone is entitled to their wrong opinions.